All right, I think we're going live in. Oh, hang on, failed to go
I think
live.
we are live.
Oh, we are live. Oh, hello. Okay, we're live, yo. What's going on? We are here with Tessa Bird. Woo! And the
Hi.
amazing Sheena Ladwa. Woo!
Hey everyone.
So, guys, welcome. This is our first of our UA webinars in this series. We're very, very excited about what we've put together for you. It's a great program of different webinars which feed into a whole bunch of workshops right through the year. And the most important thing about these webinars is that they're free. So thank you, Tessa, for joining us and
Very
lending
welcome.
a bit of your time. I would like to just get you to say a little bit about you and tiny bit about like a summarization of what you've done, what you're up to at the moment.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Tessa. I'm an artist manager. My experience has been varied. I have a number of years of experience in the industry. I started off in labels. I've been in labels for about 10 years, everyone from EMI to Sanctuary to Sony to Psycho. And for the past year and a half, I've been in artist management, which leads me here today.
Awesome, awesome. And Sheena, thanks for joining us. Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Pleasure.
I know you're going to kick off with some questions that people have sent to you, so go for it.
Cool. Hi Tessa. It's good to see you again. The
You
first
too.
question that we had was, how did you get into the world of music and management?
Well, I've been a fan of music since a young age. I loved going to concerts. There was always music in my house, and I knew I wanted to work in the industry in some capacity. However, I can't sing, I can't play any instruments, and I'm fairly camera shy. So I knew it'd have to be behind the scenes on the business side of the industry. I decided to go to university. I studied recording arts, which covered the elements of the business side of the industry, as well as the more practical elements. So I'm a qualified audio engineer and worked in production. I definitely realised that the business side is where my strengths were and where I'd be able to perform to, you know, the greatest effect. To get into the industry, I was lucky enough to, well, I got work experience at one of the biggest independent labels in Europe, Sanctuary. I decided to go for an independent label rather than a major label because I thought I'd get the opportunity to experience a lot more rather than just being one number in a bigger label. And the old cliche of it's not what you know, it's who you know, and getting your foot in the door for me was very true, because that work experience then led to me getting a full-time permanent job as a label assistant. So from there I worked my way in different departments at different labels, connecting with the people and the contacts that I'd made at the labels in the industry. And as I say, worked at a number of different labels from Sanctuary to EMI to Sony, and most recently at the label I was at was Psycho. It was at Psycho that I had the opportunity to work with Simon Cowell. I was very lucky to be one of his personal assistants, and it's what led me to decide to become an artist manager. Working with a talent like Simon made me realise that, you know, that was where my calling was, and I definitely wanted to manage talent, and that talent is an artist, and be involved in more of the different aspects of being an artist than just the label side of it. I was interested in learning about the live side, brands, music writing, publishing. And so I found myself going from Psycho to managing a couple of the acts that were on the 2014 year of X Factor, most notably Fleur East.
Amazing.
Awesome. And do you have a kind of background in music, or just a love for music yourself? Like like, how does that connect with what you're doing right now? Do you play anything? Do you sing, or are you totally detached from that side of it?
I don't. I'm actually totally detached from that side of it. I'd love for my parents to have made me play the piano so I could have that side of things. But it's just a pure love for music. There was always music in my house. I've been to every kind of concert you can imagine. I've seen Michael Jackson, I've seen Stevie Wonder, I've seen Alicia Keys, I've seen Beyonce. I go to classical concerts. I go to the proms. Every kind of music that you can think of live, I love to absorb it. And just that real passion and love for music made me know that whatever I was doing in life had to involve music.
Yeah.
So you touched on something earlier. Now, a singer's journey will vary, I think. Like, you start off at one point, and you think that's the way it's going to go, and then obviously time changes that. Your knowledge, your education can change that course of that journey. You talked about what you studied and then kind of the practical elements that led you to being in management. Do you think it's important to have an education of some sort in music, or can you really kind of almost forge your way in that industry just through practical experiences?
You can definitely forge your way through the industry without the qualifications. I just knew personally I wanted to go to university and get a degree. I love to study, and I continue to read about the industry now, even though I have very practical experience and over 10 years of experience working in the industry. I still like to keep on top of current trends and changes, because in all honesty, there's no greater experience than hands-on experience. But for me, as I say, personally, I wanted to get a degree, and it allowed me to work out how the industry worked before immersing myself, completely into it, and working out what part of the industry I wanted to be involved in. Because as I say, I knew I didn't, or I couldn't be a singer or a performer. When I initially started, before I started my degree, I thought I wanted to be an A&R, which is artist and repertoire, which is finding music for artists and scouting talent. But I find myself here now that my passion is actually in artist management. And yes, some of those, talent scouting and finding the right producers and writers to work with an artist helped me with artist management. But a degree, I found that I had quite a strong love for the legal side of the industry and, as I say, the business side of the industry, rather than being in a studio and recording a band. Whilst I still loved that side, I knew that my strengths were going to be the business side. So that helped me when I joined the label to be clearly focused on what I wanted to achieve.
Amazing. So if we think about some of the singers that are on this webinar right now, I think one of the questions that comes up time and time again is, when in their musical journey should a singer seek a manager? At what point, and how important is a manager?
I don't think there's one answer or one size fits all. Every artist is completely different. And I think, artists' careers develop at different rates. And it's also what the artist wants to achieve as well. There's many artists that can get themselves to a certain point without a professional manager. And to be fair, in the early stages of many artists' career, there isn't the sufficient workload or need for a professional manager. There may be some artists on this webinar that have a certain number of contacts already, so are able to get themselves on showcases, that are able to use friends or family members that have home studios so they can record themselves demos. However, everyone will get to a certain stage where they know that they themselves can't take the career to the next step. Whether or not you're not able to get onto showcases, or if you haven't got time to answer the questions that you're getting whilst you are performing, it differs from person to person. But I think as soon as you know that you can do no more for yourself and you need somebody, you know, that has the right attitude and the right contacts, then I believe that is the best time to then seek management. There may be some artists on this webinar that are lucky enough that they've already had managers approaching them already, which is always a bonus. But again, it's about finding the right person with the right contacts.
You talk about finding a manager. How does one go about finding their first manager?
There's a number of ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way. I think personally the best and first step should be via recommendations. There may be hopefully a number of people on this webinar that do already work with a number of professionals in the industry already. You may have an accountant, you may have a lawyer, you may have a vocal coach or a choreographer that you work with. All of these professionals work together closely on a regular basis within the industry. And I think word of mouth and recommendations is always the best way to get the right connection, because a management relationship with an artist is very personal and is very important. And I think if you do work with a professional already, they will know the kind of person you are and therefore the kind of person that might be right to manage you. A second way could be to think about some artists that you like, see how you like how their career's progressing. Maybe do then a little bit of research about who their manager is. You know, do they work independently? Do they work for a larger management company? But I think what I need to kind of stress is be realistic. You may look and go, "Oh, I love Justin Bieber's career," but are you really going to be able to grab the attention of Scooter Braun? You may well be able to. If that's your expectation and that's where you're setting your sights, just make sure you have a very good plan of how to try and get there. I think the best way to attract the attention of some of the more established managers is to start that work yourself. You know, you need to think about maybe uploading some covers or original material to YouTube, to SoundCloud, so artists can put their voice out there and managers can see a little something before necessarily seeing them at a showcase. It may encourage them to go to a showcase. You know, social media is always extremely important as well. Keeping your profile up on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. If you're hugely passionate about what you do, then you need to show that you have that drive and initiative yourself to put yourself out there. It's hard enough. Labels expect almost a finished article to come to them via managers now. And managers to a degree want to see a little of an artist doing that themselves. So I think it's very important to put yourself out there. One piece of advice I will say when you are talking to managers is be very wary of a manager that comes to you and offers you the world and asks you to sign with them immediately. I think it's important if you meet an artist at a showcase or they connect you with you via Facebook, that you see just what it is you're about and what they're about, and find out, if they are promising you the world, how are they going to promise you the world?
That's really interesting.
If an artist says to a manager, "I want to be a star," and the manager goes, "Great, I can make you a star," that doesn't achieve anything, because in all honesty, you need to know what the strategy is.
Cool. I've got a question here. First of all, Pauline says hi, Tessa. Agatha says hi, Tessa. Josephine saying, "I love your pure passion for music." Eva says hi. So we've got a question from Olivia, and she says, "Hi, Tessa. My question is, what do you look for in an artist as a manager?"
Hi, Olivia. For me, and this won't be the same for every artist manager, but for me personally, I need to feel personally connected with an artist. Like I said, be wary of an artist a manager that just wants to sign you without sitting down with you, getting to know you. I'd like to be, or consider myself, a fan of the artist. Would I want to listen to that music? Would I be able to provide insight because I know the kind of music they'd want to make and who they would be as an artist? the next thing I do once I've had that conversation with them is, and I'm very big on finding out what the goals are of the artist, finding out what the short, mid and long-term goals are. By sitting down with a manager and an artist and looking through those goals, for me, I'll be able to ascertain whether or not I would be able to help the artist reach their goals. If the goals are not those that I believe that I can help fulfill or deliver, then the relationship's not going to be right. You know, that for me is very important. And 4 other things that are really important for me, not just for me, but I think in terms of being successful as an artist anyway, are talent, desire, belief and commitment. You need all 4 of those in abundance to really be able to make it. And I need to be able to feel those from the artist to really give 120%. The job that I do is 24/7. You need to feel that you're getting as much from the artist as the artist is getting from you. For me, those are the most important things when I'm looking to work with an artist.
We've been in a situation, Tessa, where some of our artists that come through the UA program have been approached by agents. What's the difference between an agent and a manager?
There's a fair difference. In a music sense, an agent can be mostly a live booking agent. So whilst I think in the early stages of an career, a manager could fulfill the role of both a manager and an agent. However, it's very unlikely that an agent could fulfill the role of the manager. An agent, as I say, is most likely to be a booking agent, a live booking agent. So it would be their job to look for and book shows and a tour for the artist. In some instances, an artist may also look to be an actor in some way or form. So they may need a theatrical agent. You know, the role that they undertake, the commission that they would take, and the relationship that they got with the artist is very different to that of a manager. The roles they undertake, they're more likely to have multiple artists that they look after. And as I say, they very much only concentrate on the booking of concerts and shows. You've got a number of different types of agencies as well. You've got a big agency like Creative Artist Agency that would be able to fulfill both a live booking agent role and also a theatrical agent role. However, some of the smaller music specific agents would very unlikely be able to procure acting roles. In addition to the roles that they would undertake, the commission, whilst on average an artist manager would take 20% commission, a live agent is very likely only to take around 10%. That's not to say that you should go, I'm going to find a live agent because the commission is less. They won't fulfill a whole array of other things that the manager is so much responsible for and are very, very important. And as we've got some international people logged in, I think it's important for me to mention that in California, there's actually a law restricting the dual role. So if you're a manager, you cannot act as an agent, and if you're an agent, you cannot act as a manager. Right. You know, as you get to a stage in your career, it will be vital that you have both a manager and an agent. But I think what's really important to point out that is, whilst the manager, you know, is across the whole of an artist's career in its entirety, an agent will just be looking at that one specific role. But you know, it will be the agent's responsibility and the manager's responsibility to work together to ensure that the live plans fit into the whole, you know, strategy of what the artist is all about and what they want to achieve.
That's really great advice. Really great advice. And one of the questions here, which I'm kind of keen to know as well, is could you give an example of a strategy? So
yeah,
for someone
of course.
that's
Yeah, I think this definitely comes back to the short, mid and long-term goals that I mentioned. And these goals shouldn't only be done once in an artist's career. I believe they should be reviewed as often as possible, depending on how quickly the artist's career is progressing. It can be anywhere from 3, 6 to 12 months. I think it's important that once you work out the goals, you then decide what the strategy is going to be for each thing. So if an artist's goal is to be signed to a label, then it's sitting down and going, okay, how do we reach that goal? We need music. We need to ensure that we have a live plan, that we're working on our social and digital numbers and strategy. It very much is about working out how to get from A to B, that you're not just being reactive to things, but you're being proactive, and you, as I say, you know how you're getting from A to B and what the goals are and how you're going to reach those goals. It's difficult to explain specifically what a specific strategy is, because it really does depend on what the goals are and who the artist is.
All right.
And
so let's say my goal, I'm an artist, and my goal was, you know, and this is because it happens a lot.
Yep.
No, I want to be signed to Psycho, or I want to be signed to Columbia. You know, I want a record deal. Is that a realistic goal, or am I just being pie in the sky? You know?
No, that's always a realistic goal, and I think it will very much depend on what experience you've already had. If you are a songwriter as well as a singer, if you have much live experience, how much exposure and content you have online already. If, for example, Joshua, you're a brand new artist, you've been singing for a couple of years and you've never been exposed to anything, you know, I would very much advise that goal is a long-term goal rather than a short to mid-term goal. You know, I would then advise that the short-term goal would be to, again, it depends the kind of performer that you are and the kind of artist that you are. You know, if you're a singer-songwriter and you're able to play on piano or guitar yourself, then I would prioritize on your short goals to do a couple of open mic nights to start building the confidence that you have on stage. And if you are a songwriter, I would potentially look at adding as a midterm goal before a recording contract, potentially saying let's maybe try, because by you getting a publishing deal, you may be able to get into the studio with some songwriters and producers that you wouldn't maybe get the opportunity to do so until you were signed to a label. So that already, as it goes back to my earlier point, that the labels are now looking for an almost ready to go artist, you know, by having that experience and exposure through live and through working with the right artists and producers to find out the kind of artist that you want to be, would then lead on to, you know, the long-term goal, which would be to sign the deal. And I think it very much comes back to who the manager is as well and what experience they have. You know, as an artist, you might want to sign to Psycho. If you do want to sign to Psycho, then you're very much a pop orientated artist. So it's about finding the right manager who has the pop world experience. You know, as a pop artist, there's no point going with an incredible manager who specializes in heavy metal music or in dance music, because they won't necessarily have the right contacts, the right experience, or just the right way of mind to be a pop artist signing to the likes of Psycho.
Got you. That's a really interesting one. That's a really great one. I've got another question here from Slovenia. Maya asks, hello everyone, how to find a manager from another country? I have the feeling in Slovenia it's really hard. So I guess she's almost saying, if you're a Slovenian artist or if you're a French artist, is it the same kind of thing, or could you get a manager who's like in another country managing you, or does it have to be in that country? What if you've done, like, for instance, I know Maya has done The Voice in Germany and kind of got a bit of a profile. Like, how does she go about getting a decent manager?
I think everybody's got to start somewhere. I don't know the Slovenian industry as well as I do the UK and the US market and industry. But again, it depends on what stage you are at of your career. I'm aware of some artists from abroad who literally packed up everything without a manager, without contacts, and moved to the US or the UK because they felt that they would perform well in those markets and they really were willing to try absolutely anything. There, they then reach out to help them in that market. That's not to say that you shouldn't look for a manager in your own market, and start building a profile and start understanding a little about who you are as an artist, what a manager can offer to you. But one thing I would say, to go back as well to looking for a manager, is when you do decide to sign a contract with a manager, very much think about the term and, you know, the basic deal structure of the agreement, that you don't want to be signed up to someone forever if they then can't take you to that next level. You may find that there's plenty of managers in Slovenia that have international contact. You know, the world is shrinking all the time with, you know, technology and media the way it's being, that people are able to connect with anyone, anywhere. And, you know, with the likes of Spotify and everything being so global, that you don't necessarily have to move to a country to make it work there. You know, I'd say the likes of Spotify and YouTube make everything so global. You know, if they've got the right attitude and the right strategy to deliver you and to put your music out there and make the right moves, then, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go elsewhere to find a manager. That you can definitely find a manager in your market, but it's all about finding out what their experience is. And if you do want to go internationally, have they got the capacity to do that for you?
Interesting.
Tessa, I just want to backtrack for a second. You talked about social media and YouTube. Now, we hear it all the time as independent artists to try and do it all. You know, write, record, be in the studio, be performing live, have all your social media going at the same time, and it just keeps increasing, social media platforms. You as a manager, would you say that that whole social media side is, in terms of list of priorities, really high, or would it be about the music and being out live and kind of being talk of the town on, say, the London Live circuit, for example? What's most important? Because you know, a lot of independent artists will say, we have to earn a living and then make the music in order for something to be out there.
Yep.
What's kind of your thoughts on that?
It differs from artist to artist. If you are a singer-songwriter type of artist, then I think the most important thing would be live gigs and putting music on SoundCloud and YouTube, because you want to show that level of musicianship. And that kind of artist, in my experience, does best when it travels word of mouth. So yes, you need to do a little on social media, just because people will look to that, labels will look to that. But the most important thing is, I think, as well, knowing your audience. If your audience is a very young millennial audience, then social media is going to be very important. However, if you are a James Arthur type artist who is a singer-songwriter, very comfortable behind a guitar, and is all about the music, then I think the priority is live performances and that musicianship. However, if you are more of an all singing, all dancing pop artist, you know, the likes of Justin Bieber, where, you know, you've got girls of 12 to 16 who are your core audience, social media is vital. You know, it sounds silly, but he could quite literally sing the phone book and girls wouldn't care, as long as there was a lovely picture of him on Instagram. And, you know, he's talking to his fans in a social way. So yeah, it differs from artist to artist. You need a little bit of everything, but I think you need to tailor what you're concentrating your time on, depending on the kind of artist you are and who your core audience is.
Excellent. Okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. Artist has gone through that process. They've built up their profile, and now they're being approached by managers. And it's that way around. They're being approached. What kind of questions, say top 3 or 5 questions, should the artist be asking the manager before they make the commitment of signing to them, signing anything for that matter?
I think first question to ask is, what's the manager's background? Sorry. In all honesty, anyone can be a manager, and that's not to take anything away from what we do, but, you know, they don't necessarily have to have a specific qualification. They don't have to come from a specific part of the country. They don't have to do anything but be a great planner, organizer, strategist, and have a real passion for music. So I think the first question would be, what's their background, to get a good idea of where they've come from, what they're about. Managers can be primarily lawyers, they can be accountants. You know, I come from a label background. They could be a former artist themselves. And it's interesting to, as I say, find out what their level and area of expertise is, and how that might help or influence you on your journey. And then I think the next thing to ask is who they've worked with before. Like I said previously, if you're a pop artist, what you don't want is a great manager necessarily that's very strong in the world of heavy metal or dance, and not the area that you want to focus on. Me, I'm very much a pop artist manager, and my contacts and my circle of peers are very much in that world. I can say quite confident, if a country artist came to me, that I probably wouldn't know what to do with them, or at least I wouldn't be able to give them what they needed, as well as somebody from a country background or a passion for country music could give. Find out who they're currently working with, you know, again, to find out whether or not they're the kind of manager that gets you as an artist, and do they have the time to work with you? It's fine in the early stages if an artist is maybe one of a few artists with a manager. However, once things really start to pick up and you become very busy, then what you don't want is a manager working on another artist 90% of the time, and they can only give you 10% of their time, because you're going to feel a little disheartened, and it's going to be difficult to achieve what you want to achieve. You know, not all managers work exclusively with one artist, but I think you should work out how many other artists they're working with to ascertain whether or not they have the time to give you what you want and what you need. What the basic terms of their management agreement may be. For example, the term of the contract, what their commission will be, and, you know, what the roles and responsibilities are going to be between the two. I would advise against anyone signing up to a management contract which signs them in for life, which gives away commission for life, which gives away too much commission. You know,
what's a good amount of commission to give away?
A good amount of commission to give away, the standard is 20%. Some bigger management companies may ask for more, depending on, what they can offer and if they're going to put in a huge amount of investment.
Sure.
Some managers may start off on a smaller commission. You may be able to work with a manager if they're really passionate about you on a sliding scale. The amount of commission is relative to the money that they're making you and the deals that they're getting you. So, and it's very important when you talk about those initial terms that you kind of have an idea of what the standard industry rates and times, etc. are, but always get legal advice. 100%.
So when you say term, you're talking about how long that relationship
Correct.
will be for.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then I'm just trying to process that in layman's terms. So I can basically say, I want you to list what you will do, what your responsibilities are going to be towards my career. So if it's going to be managing my social media or not, that you expect me to do that, or if it's going to be going out and getting me things, I should get them to list those things for me.
It doesn't have an exhaustive list of duties and responsibilities, but it should be all due care and diligence and going it's going to be very personal of what you think they can deliver and how much time they will spend on you.
Right.
And will it be all encompassing? Will there be a sliding scale? Will it differ from time to time? Do I only work a number of hours at the very beginning? Once you get to a certain stage or a certain time period, do I commit more time to you?
Right.
But I think every manager, or at least a management company, will have basic terms that they can provide, and then you see whether or not that makes sense to you and what you want to achieve. But as I say again, always get legal advice.
Yeah, I know of a few artists who got into relationships with managers who actually had what seemed to be credible CVs, but in the end, the managers weren't actually doing anything for the artist. So I kind of feel like maybe that the mistake was maybe being caught up by the CV a little bit, perhaps even being in a situation where other people were going, oh yeah, they're cool, do you know what I mean?
This brings me on to my final question that I would ask, which is, why do you want to manage me? Don't sell yourself short by any stretch of the imagination, and don't get too caught up in, somebody wants to manage me. That's not the way to be. You want somebody that actually wants to manage you, that's not just stumbled upon you and all of a sudden, before you know it, because there's no one else to manage you, or it seems like the first person that said they want to manage you, and like you said, somebody who looks like they've got the right CV, they need to be as passionate about you as you are about yourself as an artist. And I think that final question is the most important. Why do you want to manage me? What is it about me that is going to make you work 24/7, and that is going to make you deliver what I would deliver for myself and what I'd expect? I think that's very important.
Which kind of leads on to the next question, Tessa, which is, what are the key responsibilities of a manager?
Wow, I think what aren't the key responsibilities of a manager? A manager has to absolutely love what they do. For me, I absolutely have to love the artist that I'm working with. You're a planner, you're an advisor, you're an organizer, you're a strategist, you are an overseer, a travel companion, you're a friend, you're a psychologist and psychiatrist, and everything in between.
Right.
A manager has to care about every single part of the artist's life, not just the professional side of it. They have to understand what's going on personally, and really, I'd say, understand the artist inside out, to get the best out of the artist, and to ensure that they can read between the lines and pick up on the signs when the artist is feeling tired, or you know, when they're not quite comfortable in a situation, and it's not right for the artist to say that they don't want to do something. You know, the artist needs to be able to go, I'm going to step in here because, or without it being said, I know they're not comfortable, and, you know, they need to, we need to change the question in an interview or something like that. So a manager has to be everything, absolutely everything. It's quite interesting. So I remember watching the Amy documentary, and
really
there was
saddened me
one,
that did.
well, there was one, as an artist manager, there was one point in it that really I found quite disturbing and really upsetting, was when the guy who was her tour manager, who became her manager, when she was going through tough times and should have gone to rehab, and she was all over the place, and the manager was like, well, it's not my responsibility, it's the family's responsibility now.
I remember that.
And that frustrated me so much, because it's like, no, that's your responsibility as well. You know, everything about that artist's life is your responsibility.
Amazing.
You know, and yeah, as I say, a manager is everything.
Yeah,
is everything.
So this leads on to another interesting question from Hannah Olivia again. If you have a manager that you become unhappy with, what should you do?
Hopefully you shouldn't get to that situation. You know, if you've done the right research and you've asked the right questions, and, you know, not signed a management agreement immediately, any good manager would be happy to, you know, maybe spend a couple of weeks, a couple of months getting to know each other, attending some shows, doing a little bit of the groundwork ahead of making an artist sign on the dotted line. And I think hopefully you should feel comfortable enough with the manager that you shouldn't get to that stage. However, if you do get to that stage, I think it's important to go back to the fact that this is why it's important not to sign up to too long of a contract period, and that you may have options to break if things are uncomfortable.
So what's a good time what's a good term?
An average term is around about 3 years, but I would ideally suggest, you know, a break clause of maybe 6 months. However, there will be situations where the manager will want to cover themselves, because they do have to put in a lot of time and effort to get an artist to where they get to. And as I say, if an artist progresses very quickly in the first 6 months, and then all of a sudden a number of other managers are starting to circle, it's unfair to just step away because you think the shiny bright lights of someone else is going to take you further. You need to think about what somebody has done for you up until that point. Right. But I think, you know, there needs to be maybe a break clause with mutual consent. It can't be one just terminating if the other one's not happy to do so. But yeah, 3 years I think is fair, but there should be certain parts of the contract that maybe allow for a break. You know, if certain financial rewards are not received, or certain targets are not reached, for example, you know, if you promised and in your goals that you're going to get a recording contract or a publishing deal, you know, if these are not achieved in what's deemed a reasonable amount of time, there should be the ability to mutually say, okay, we can walk away from this and it's not right. Because, you know, as a manager myself, I would never want to be with an artist who was unhappy to be with me.
Sure.
You know, so it should work both ways. It doesn't always work both ways, because, you know, some managers are going to say, you know, I've put the time and the effort in, I should get the rewards. And, you know, rightly so, because it, as I say, it is a lot of time and effort, and, you know, it's important to honour that. But, you know, really think carefully, I think, initially before you sign a management contract, to ensure the manager is the right manager.
So when you say break,
because you could...
we're talking about just taking a break, or like completely?
No, which could terminate the contract.
Right. Okay. But
again, this is something that once you get to a stage that you may be signing a management contract, that you should seek legal advice, and, you know, a trained entertainment lawyer will be able to advise what's advisable, and you you know, they may have experience of that manager and know what they're about. So, you know, it's very important to have those initial conversations, make sure you are comfortable, and then they're not just signing you up for life. And then when you do get to a stage that you are happy to sign a contract, that you discuss with a lawyer to see if there are certain things that you can put into place that makes both parties happy.
Awesome.
So I think, Havana, probably one of the questions we'd have for you is, have you actually signed a contract with this manager, and kind of then move from that point afterwards? So let us know and we'll try and help you. Tessa, coming back to you, one of the questions that came in was, what do you look for in an artist before making the decision to work with them or sign them?
Like I say, I really need to be passionate about the artist.
Yeah.
Feel that I could be a fan and love what they do and give insight into, you know, knowing what that artist is all about and knowing the market that they would appeal to. And yeah, going back to my short, mid and long-term goals, you know, that's so essential for me to discover whether or not I could actually deliver what they want, because there's no point me working with an artist who says, look, within the next 6 months, I want to be, you know, performing at the Grammys. If I don't think that I'm going to deliver that, then, or I don't think that's a realistic expectation, but they're adamant that they want to achieve that, then, you know, I put my hands up and say, maybe I'm not the one for you. And then again, it goes back to talent, desire, commitment and belief, which are essential, not just for me, but to be able to actually make it in this industry, full stop. Because if you don't have those in abundance and you don't believe in yourself and you don't know who you are and the direction that you want to take, then, you know, it's difficult enough anyway at the best of times, but it's near on impossible if you haven't got that oozing from you.
Wow. And I'm coming to the final question, and then I'll hand over to Josh. But what's your advice on a parent or friend becoming one's first manager?
I think in the early stages, it can be beneficial. Like I say, if there's not the sufficient demand to get into a contract with a full-time professional manager, then it can be quite helpful, particularly for a younger artist, to get that guidance and advice and help that they may need. However, I would say do so cautiously, and I would, you know, advise very strongly to set out some very clear guidelines and markers of what the expectations are, where one relationship finishes and the other one starts. And I'd always have an agreement in place, no matter whether they're a friend, a parent, a friend of a friend, or a professional that you've been recommended to. You know, an agreement, once you're happy with the individual, is so important, so that, you know, 3 years down the line, when things are starting to happen, you know where you stand, you know the commission that's being taken, you know what the expectations are. But I think it's very important, before you commit too long to a friend or a family member, to think about, you know, do they have the contacts and the experience to get you where you need to go to? Are they just going to be a yes person? And are they going to be able to provide advice objectively? Because that's very important. You know, you can't have somebody that's just going to say yes to everything and not give you the kind of advice that's absolutely vital that you receive to grow as a person and an artist. What you got to think of is that, you know, record executives, when they're dealing with you, they look at you as a business, and you need to look at that as a bit, you know, yourself as a business as well. Because, you know, in some instances, for example, you know, you look at Beyonce, her dad was her manager and Destiny's Child manager for many years. It worked, yes, because he had their best interests at heart, but, you know, that family unit kind of broke apart to a degree because the business got in the way. So you need to decide how strong your friendship is, if you can have serious conversations, and, as I say, whether or not that friend or parent actually has the contacts and the know-how to get you where you want to go. You know, it's really important. But if you're going to do it, do so cautiously.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So we
Some
got
great
about
stuff there.
10 minutes left. Man, I could sit here for 10 hours. So we got a question from Pauline. Thanks, Pauline. Thank you for mentioning the beautiful movie Amy. I was wondering, how can an artist last in the music business? In brackets, strategy, different managers.
It all depends on the type of artist you are, your drive, your passion, your determination. It sounds like you're the kind of artist that, you know, you do want that longevity. So you need to think about everything you do, what the ultimate goal is. You know, once you reach goals, set new ones to keep on challenging yourself and keep on moving to the next stage and to the next step. You know, you look at some of the artists that have been around for years. You know, I'll go to Beyonce again, because she's a fairly new artist in the sense of, you know, she's not a Tina Turner or an Elton John who have been around for 40 years, but, you know, she's been doing it for, I think, maybe 20 years now. And, you know, she's always setting new goals and new boundaries. She's, other than the fact that she's moved from her dad and she's managing herself, she's always stuck with the same manager.
Sure.
I personally believe that it's good to, you know, stick with that one manager that you know has been with you from day one, that, you know, is not going to just jump on the bandwagon because things are going well. However, if you do get to the stage where you are with a manager that you have been with, you know, again, you can have these honest conversations. If you feel that they've taken you as far as they can actually take you, a manager that, you know, respects you and wants the best for you would be willing to, you know, hold their hands up and say, I can't take you any further, you know, and here's the next step for you. I think as a singer, and I think Josh would definitely stick with this, you know, no parties. Well, not no parties, but, you know, think about,
Yeah.
you know, what you want. You know, if you're a singer and you really take your art seriously, then, you know, you need to think about what you have to give up in your life, which is, you know, you go to a party, but you need to know to go home early, that if you're going to be performing the next day, you know, no drinking. You know, you've really got to look after yourself, almost like an athlete. The best athletes and the ones that perform for the longest are those that take care of their body the most, you know, and the same goes for you guys as singers and as artists. You really need to look after yourself, and, you know, if you want a long career, then, you know, don't let the fame go to your head and go to the first party and, you know, go here and go there. And, you know, you need to look at it as a business and prioritize the right things.
And I think you have to also make sacrifices for the fact that there's a unique gift about you and there's something special about you that others don't have. And that's going to put you into an environment that has a lot of responsibility and a lot of demand. And so, you know, you can't look at your life as anybody else sort of not doing that, or not, you know, in that sort of environment would look at their lives. So it's a very different mindset as well.
Yeah, correct. And I think it's really important to surround yourself with the right people that are going to keep you grounded, people that do have your best interests at heart. And I know a lot of people, you know, they think that when they become an artist and they are working, you know, full-time as an artist, that they want all their friends on their team and they'll give their friend that job and give their friend that job. I think one piece of advice I'd always give to an artist that I'm working with is the only people that should be traveling with you or in your entourage or, you know, dealing with us on a business level should be those that actually have something to offer. You know, I'm very much against having 300 people backstage, you know, hangers on and people that shouldn't be there. Again, it's a business. You wouldn't go to a business meeting and bring your best friend along or your mum along. You know, there's a time and a place that you can enjoy that with your friends and family, but business comes first. And if you've always got the right, you know, belief and commitment, you can have longevity if you look after yourself and you have the right attitude about things.
So we're just 5 minutes left. So, hi, Tessa. My question is that I'm currently in the development process of my writing, my first songs, developing my voice, and working on music production. You mentioned short-term goals such as open mics. Have you got any more suggestions for more short-term goals I could work on? And that's from Patrick.
Hi, Patrick. Yeah, it depends how far along you are in your development, whether or not you want to start uploading videos to YouTube and start, sharing your music with a wider audience outside of just, the few people that you perform to in front of a crowd. Because part of being an artist is not just about performing on stage, but you have to perform in videos, looking at TV interviews and press, things like that. So to be able to be in an enclosed and confined space and still be able to connect with people, is really, really important and a great way to develop yourself as an artist. Make sure when you do go to open mic nights, or if you join different work groups or classes or Facebook groups, with like-minded people, that develop yourself as a songwriter. Don't just stick to the same writers that you might be working with. If you work on your own, try to experiment working with other like-minded artists to develop you and to show you maybe different ways of learning things and doing things. You may also want to, study and read articles and interviews by artists that you like, to start getting yourself in the right mindset, developing who you are and learning who you are as an artist. I know a great artist that used to always read so many interviews, watch documentaries, of girl bands and things like that, to kind of really learn what it is they do on a day-to-day, and just give yourself so much knowledge, which is not just so insular and what am I about, but it's what are other people doing, what can I learn, what can I change, how can I develop, so that for me, you should always be, as an artist and a manager, willing to learn and develop and grow and change with what's going on. I'd also suggest reading music press as well. Music Week, sign up to Music Business Week. You may not be interested in the business side of things, but it's important for an artist that they don't leave everything in the hands to the manager. The more knowledge that you have, the more information that you have, the better you can be as an artist, and you can challenge your manager, you can challenge the people around you, you can challenge other artists. Knowledge is power, as well as having the talent. To have that knowledge and know what you're talking about just gives you so much more.
So that really get into the center of what you're about, where you want to be, and really absorb that as much as you can.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a singer-songwriter who plays guitar, read or watch some documentaries or live performances of John Mayer, Bob Dylan, people that would be your idols, who you aspire to be. Really learn who they are, what they had to battle through, and how they got to where they are, because it's a really interesting way to learn what to do and what not to do. And as a fan of music, which I'm sure you are, Patrick, reading and learning that side of things will develop you.
Definitely, 100%. That's really good advice. Whoa, wow. Okay, so hi Tessa, my question is, what if you are of interest of someone who has managed someone from country but also brought them over to pop? I don't get the question. Hang on. Hi Tessa, my question is, what if you are of interest to someone who has managed someone from country, I guess it's country music,
Yep,
but also brought them over to pop? I
think, as I say, by having somebody that specializes in a certain area, as I say, I'm not saying it's a no-go, but the fact that you've said that, I don't know if you're a country artist yourself or a pop artist, but that manager has had the ability to transition from one musical genre to the other. But if you're then thinking about going to that artist and they straddle both, you know, that's great. You know, if they are specialists in a number of different areas, then if you yourself decide you want to transition, that does make it easier. I think what I want to highlight is if you're going to a manager who is very much entrenched in one type of genre of music and you are very much the opposite, then it's going to be very difficult, because, as I say, the contacts that they have and the people they're talking to are not necessarily going to be a benefit to you. It's not to say that they can't make those contacts, but just it's something to be wary of and to think about. As me as an artist, if I was, as I say, a pop artist, you know, to go with a manager of heavy metal bands, I feel wouldn't be in my best interest. However, to go to a manager who has taken, for example, you know, the type of person you're explaining is Taylor Swift. That manager was a manager for a number of years with Taylor and artists beforehand in the country arena, and because of his wealth of experience, this goes back to finding out what their experience is and who they have worked with before. You know, if they've worked in the industry for 20 years and they've just showed most recently they've been able to transition from one genre to another, you know, they're a great manager, they've got great experience, and you know, they have been able to do that. So, but I'd say for me, I would advise being cautious if you pick a manager, as an artist that's only specifically, you know, entrenched in one genre of music, if you want to do something else.
Interesting. All right. So, final question. Do you have any tips? That last question is from Josephine. Thanks, Josephine.
Thanks, Josephine.
Another question. Do you have any tips on how to build a fan base on social media? We'll end with that question.
Yeah, I think the best way to do it is by starting to follow people that you know would be the core audience. So, for example, if you are similar to Taylor Swift, have a look at the kind of people that are following Taylor Swift. You may be able to start following a few people, you know, talking to them directly if you have the time, saying, you know, hi, I'm an artist, check me out. I remember I followed somebody fairly recently, I think it was Izzy Bizu, and you know, I got a reply back saying, hi, thanks for following me, check out my music. You know, if what happens often with the younger generation is if you follow someone on Twitter, not an artist, but you know, fans of music, they might follow you back. So, you know, have something like that thank you, which directs them to a page. Make sure on your social media page that if you know, you have got something to direct them to, that you're not just talking inane nonsense. You know, I think very much keep your personal Twitter and your professional Twitter and Instagram, whatever, quite separate, because what you maybe want to say on here doesn't necessarily reflect who you are as an artist. But I think you need to think about the content and, you know, think about who you are. Again, you know, reference who you're comparing yourself to. If you are a Taylor Swift type artist, what kind of things does she post on Instagram? What kind of things does she talk about? But I think it's important to have music to share. You know, if you are going to be performing at a showcase, that you tell people that you're going to be performing at a showcase. If you then perform at that showcase, make sure you're putting pictures up of it, make sure that you're able to get the video content. You know, ask a friend. You don't have to spend money. Everyone's got some friends that, you know, is a budding photographer or wants to record video. You know, the kind of things that you can record on your iPhone and iPad now is great. You know, get some friends to film some content and start putting that up, and, you know, putting that information out on YouTube, and making sure that you're always directing people to content and showing them who you are creatively. You know, you may also be, you know, an artist, and you may draw, and, you know, add that creativity to your social pages. So it just brings all those different elements of who you are as an artist to your fans. And I think as you start to go to showcases and perform and put in videos on YouTube and SoundCloud, that you make sure that you link everything in together and you direct one to the other, and so forth, to then you know, hopefully word of mouth then build up that fan base. But it's not easy. It's a tough thing to do. You know,
Full-time
even
job, isn't it?
yeah, it really is.
So to that end, we have come to the end of this webinar. From Olivia, she says, this is so helpful. Thank you, Tessa. Josephine says, thank you for all that advice. Pauline says, thank you, Tessa, for the great advice about longevity. Patrick says, thank you for the great advice, Tessa. So this is really, really helping everyone, Tess.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate everyone's questions.
Yeah, good questions here. Obviously, guys, the webinar will be on a replay as well, so you'll be able to access that if you haven't been able to make it today. You'll be able to get that webinar. There's also a poll for those of you that are online now. A couple of questions there that you can help us out with. Just click the answer and just give us some feedback on what you'd like to see next. And then there's an offer here regarding our next workshop and future webinars as well. Tessa, that was incredible. Like I said, I could be sitting here for another 10 hours, to be perfectly honest, and just chat to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I've learned so much from you. I continually learn from you. You're amazing. Thank you so much for being here, a part of our webinar today, our
Thank
first
you
one.
to Ultimate Artists for having me. I love you guys.
Thank you. Sheen, anything to say?
No, that's it. Just thank you to Tessa. And those questions were great. So if you missed anything or the line cut out at all, make sure you watch the replay. We'll send out the link. And yeah, we've got, I think, did you mention the next webinar on the 1st of November?
1st of November is the next one, guys. We're going to be having these musical theatre guys that we love so much. It's either going to be Richard or Julie. And they're going to go into audition techniques and musical theatre world. So sign up for that if you're interested. Get people involved, get people to register to that. That's going to be awesome. And then following that, on the 13th of November, they'll also be doing an actual workshop as well. So definitely tune in for that.
Joshua, I'd just like to add, sort of, like I said, you know, information and knowledge is king. And there's a couple of books I would recommend any of you guys reading that, you know, I say I still continue to read them, even though I have practical knowledge and I, you know, have worked in the industry for a number of years, but I like to keep learning. The first one is This Business of Artist Management. It's a really, really good book.
Can you show that again?
Yep. That's This Business of Artist Management.
Cool.
Then All You Need to Know About the Music Business. This is a very old edition of the book. There's been a very, very recent update, so the cover won't look like this. It's fairly US centric, but it's still very, very useful. You know, if you want to be an artist, if you actually want to get into management yourself, you know, this is a really good overall book that I actually read before I went to university. So that really got me started well. And another similar book, This Business of Music, which again is quite US centric, but gives a good overview of what to think about and to learn. So they're three books that I love, I've always got with me, and I always still reference them.
Amazing.
So just a little bit of extra
and I've
reading
left
for
that
some
in the
people who
comments.
want.
Yeah, I've left that in the comments there, so that's all there for you guys as well. Thank you so much, Tessa. Oh my God, that was incredible. They're already talking about someone saying, is there going to be an artist management 101 part 2? We'll see. We'll see.
Maybe.
Thank you so much, guys. God bless you all.
Bye, everyone.
Like I said,
Bye.
check out the replay. We'll catch you soon. Lots of love. God bless. See ya. Bye, Tess. Bye, Sheena.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.